Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is December 19th, and it's day 74. The big news today is the potential of conversations about the possibilities of another ceasefire for the exchange of hostages. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. The UN Security Council is in session debating an Arab state-sponsored resolution for humanitarian aid to Gaza during a temporary ceasefire, trying to avoid another veto from the United States. And a delegation of senior Hamas leaders are arriving in Cairo soon to discuss a hostage ceasefire deal with Egyptian intelligence officials. The U.S. announced a new alliance to safeguard maritime trade in the Red Sea after constant Houthi drone and missile attacks. So here are a few specific summaries. These are mostly from Israeli news sources on day 74 since the attacks on South Israel by Hamas. In Rafah, southern Gaza, Israeli security forces killed Subhi Farwanha, who was involved in the transfer of tens of millions of dollars to the Hamas military wing, according to Israeli Defense Forces. They also said that they discovered a major weapons warehouse in the Sujaiya neighborhood in Gaza City. Members of the UN Security Council, as I mentioned, are negotiating intensely ahead of a possible vote on Tuesday, today, on an Arab state-sponsored resolution calling for a ceasefire to facilitate the entry of more humanitarian aid into Gaza. We are hoping and calling on the United States to at least abstain and to avoid another veto. According to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza, there are reports of nearly 20,000 Palestinians having been killed and more than 52,000 having been wounded since October 7th. An UNRWA spokesperson warned that Gaza is at the threshold of a catastrophe that no one can describe. Significantly in the news also is the 3 elderly Israeli hostages, 3 men, the daughter of one of them, 80-year-old Chaim Peri, who was taken hostage on October 7th and shown in a video that was released by Hamas yesterday, told Israeli radio that her father is visibly unwell and won't last much longer. The War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz met today with the family of Samer El-Talalka, who, along with fellow hostages Yotam Haim and Alon Shamritz, was mistakenly shot and killed by Israeli soldiers on Friday in Gaza after escaping from Hamas captivity. That was the case that we heard about where the 3 Israeli hostages were holding a white flag and they were shot and killed by Israeli forces. The president of the International Committee of the Red Cross called Israeli criticism that the organization is a mere taxi service for hostages outrageous, adding that the situation in Gaza is a moral failure of the international community. The Israeli Defense Forces in Shin Bet released a video of the interrogation of Gaza's Kamal Adwan hospital director, in which he says about 16 hospital employees are military operatives of the Al-Qassam brigades, which is the Hamas military wing, doctors, nurses, paramedics, officials, and staff members. Quote, "The war will morph, but Biden knows Netanyahu is not a trustworthy partner regarding post-war Gaza," end quote. As I mentioned, a delegation of senior Hamas leaders is set to arrive in Cairo soon. They're supposed to discuss a hostage deal with Egyptian intelligence officials, according to Palestinian sources. This is the first time that a Hamas delegation will travel to Cairo for talks since the ceasefires collapsed. And an Egyptian source quoted in the Qatari newspaper Al Arabi Al Jadid said that the main obstacle for negotiators in Cairo and Doha towards a deal is Hamas's demand for an immediate ceasefire. The Israeli Defense Forces announced that 2 additional soldiers were killed in fighting on Monday, as well as a reserve soldier killed on Tuesday. The number of soldiers and wounded since October 7 now stands at about 1,800. And more than 2,800 soldiers have begun treatment at the Defense Ministry's Rehabilitation Department since the war broke out. 18% have mental health difficulties and PTSD. The Foreign Press Association in Jerusalem filed a petition with the Israeli Supreme Court requesting immediate access for international media into Gaza. It said embedding with the Israeli Defense Forces only offered limited access, and it excluded areas where soldiers are not present. Also, Yossi Cohen, the ex-Mossad head, once close to Prime Minister Netanyahu, said that those in charge of Israel's security on the 7th have to take responsibility for the failure. And there are people who have said it publicly and those who have not, but they are still expecting accountability. The Houthis have continued to cause trouble in the Red Sea, and the United States, together with the UK, Bahrain, Canada, France, Italy, the Netherlands, and Norway, and Spain have formed a new alliance, including joint patrol and intelligence sharing to protect ships transiting the Red Sea from Houthi attacks, according to U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. He announced today during his travels in Bahrain. The Iran-aligned Houthis chief negotiator told Reuters that the naval alliance was essentially unnecessary because all waters adjacent to Yemen are safe except for Israeli ships or ships that are directly headed to Israel. Lebanon's border continues to have rocket sirens sounding along Israel's north and northern border. Sirens continue to sound on the Gaza border as well. The IDF said that it attacked Hezbollah targets in Lebanon and that it downed a suspicious aircraft. And finally, there was a poll published by the New York Times today that showed that more Americans favor a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The poll reported that 50% of voters exhibited dissatisfaction with Biden's approach and 33% supported it. I got a note that there were actually protests on Capitol Hill and in Washington, D.C. today, continuing to call for a ceasefire. We hope that the negotiations in Cairo for a continued pause will be successful. Those who are doing Advent prayer chains, we're continuing to pray. We're praying. We'll continue to have our prayer call tomorrow, our briefing on Thursday. We're calling for people to stand in the gap, to give, act, and pray, to call for an end to all violence against civilians, and to call for a ceasefire.